The Budget Debacle, Case Study and Narrative. The summary of the case or the facts that are established begin with who? This would be Briardale Elementary School. It's a diverse community and it contains a foundation just as all elementary schools in this area do. Mr. Santos is the principal. Mr. Bailey is the new president of the foundation. And Mr. Morley is another president for a different foundation, but his actions will come into play. There's also a tipster that tips off the local sheriff's department. Mr. Carl Santos is the principal to Briardale Elementary, and Briardale is in the center of town, and because it's in the center of town and it can hold up to 1,000 people, give or take, it also serves as the town's community meeting center. The town is a very diverse community. There are 2 middle schools and 1 high school, and as I remember, there are 6 elementary schools. The high school football team is well known in the county for being a winning team. The majority of teachers have been in the district for many years, and they've spent most of their careers in this particular district. There are very few resignations, very few transfers. The teachers seem to be happy in this particular district. The district curriculum focuses on basic skills and educational instruction objectives, and each elementary school is based on student performance, which also supports an emphasis on those basic skills and instruction. The funding of the supplementary curriculum, and that curriculum would be art, music, foreign language. That is all done through fundraising money, and that fundraising is done through each elementary school's foundation. The funding formula for the supplementary curriculum has kind of been confusing in the past, and it's led to a lot of confusion for many people, and it has been an issue. This confusion has led to competition between the schools while they raise money for that supplementary education. Each school has its own foundation. Each foundation is chaired by a parent representative, and that parent representative is then the president for that foundation. The monies raised by these foundations are handed over to the principals, and then again, that funding formula takes place and it is distributed as it is seen fit by the leaders, the school leaders in the community. Mr. Santos always agreed with the recommendations for the money and how it was supposed to be used. He's also always agreed with the curriculum suggestions. Due to established protocol, Mr. Santos always forwarded all of the suggestions, all of the recommendations that were made by the foundation to the school site curriculum committee. And that's going to be a key factor in a lot of this, is that even though Mr. Santos has done that historically in the past, I think that this is a key part that has been missed in this particular scenario, in this particular case study, and it may have been able to help in this particular case. Parents are always very supportive of the supplementary programs, and they seem to be very supportive of the school district as a whole and the students and leaders, administrators, and educators. For the current school year, a parent new to the school was chosen to be a new leader for the foundation with Briardale Elementary School specifically, and that is Mr. Bailey. Mr. Bailey is very motivated by competition, and so that competition between schools was a big motivator for him. And he's motivated to fundraise a record amount of money for the foundation. Mr. Santos met with Mr. Bailey, informed him of his role, his job, his responsibilities. He went over an orientation of sorts with him. Mr. Bailey developed a strategy for selling raffle tickets for the fundraiser, and he went to the foundation to propose this idea. Everybody was in support of this idea. They loved it, and they all wanted to move forward with the raffle fundraiser. Someone, however, in the community tipped off the sheriff about the raffle for cash fundraising event, and Mr. Bailey was taken in, he was booked, and then he was later convicted of a misdemeanor. And we'll kind of look at the case for that. Briardale Elementary School is where it serves as the town community meeting center again, and this, for the win, is going to be the yearly foundation fundraiser is where all of this is going to be, or the time that all of this is going to be taking place. So let's look at the legal and ethical issues. We have fundraising violations. There are going to be illegality, of course. There are going to be possible state teaching license violations, and this has to do with any educators that are involved within this raffle or were a part of the fundraising capabilities. It could cost them their teaching license if not careful. The ethical part of the violations, Mr. Santos knew of this fundraising violation. He knew what was going to be happening and he did not stop it. The committee knew of the fundraising violation, and there just seemed to be a lack of education and knowledge while in leadership as a whole for the committees, for Mr. Santos, and for everyone to not know or to claim that there was a lack of knowledge about the raffle for cash being a violation of the law. For most, these fundraisers that are conducted seem to be simple, they seem to be harmless activities, and they're used to help these groups of students. Uh, they're raising money, whether it's high school, elementary, whoever is raising this money for the students. They are needed for resources to support their causes, their missions, the co-curricular groups, and in this particular case, it's going to be the supplementary curriculum. And the possibility for legal violations to occur with any of these fundraisers is huge. Administrators in the schools need to be aware of the potential risks. They need to make themselves aware of the potential risks. Administrators need to know what legal ramifications could potentially sideline all of the fundraisers, all of the activities, etc., for the entire school and sometimes the entire district. And they need to plan ahead and accordingly for all of these conflicts. The sentence thesis. Due to a lack of knowledge through fundraising laws as well as other policies and regulations, Mr. Santos and Mr. Barely will need to lead by example and take full ownership of the decisions made to create change and effectively and creatively instate change for the better, and more fully enhance the educational culture and environment education for the well-being and future success of all the stakeholders, including each and every student, who are the most important stakeholders by far. By means of illegal fundraising activity and a raffle for cash event. The idea itself was noble, but the illegal manner by which it was conducted without prior knowledge of the law was not excusable. Key to this whole case study, 46 states and the District of Columbia have legislation on the books already that control raffles for all fundraisers. Organizations that hold and sponsor raffles could very well be required to file for an application that controls these raffles within the state in which they are held. This did not happen in this instance. Some state raffle laws limit the number of raffles that tax-exempt organizations are allowed to hold. Other state laws regulate the value of the prizes that are given away in the raffles. They regulate the format of the tickets used for the raffles and other aspects specific to the raffles. It is absolutely always the best thing if the school leaders oversee all the raffles and raffle activities in school buildings and districts in order to be very aware of the state local laws that govern the activity of these raffles. And even more than that, it would have been great to get a hold of lawmakers and local law enforcement in order to know exactly what the key parts of the policies and laws locally, state, and federally would be for a raffle for cash. This did not happen. A synthesis of the facts. We're going to look at the knowns. For the people, Mr. Santos, he's the principal. Overall, Mr. Santos believes he is more than capable. He knows exactly how to run a school. This includes managing the budget and other financial aspects of the building of the school as a whole. After Mr. Braley was chosen to lead the school foundation, Mr. Santos, he did conduct an orientation with Mr. Braley. When he conducted this orientation, Mr. Santos informed him of his job as a fundraiser. He told him about his job as the president, his roles and responsibilities, and he needed to understand his responsibility to meet with the school site curriculum committee and inform them of any ideas that might influence the supplementary curriculum, any of the programs that would be changed, added, etc. And then also of any ideas for raffles for the fundraising overall as a whole. After the orientation meeting, Mr. Santos left Mr. Bailey to perform his duties. And there was not much information given other than that as far as whether there was communication oversight, etc. Mr. Barely, Briardale Foundation president, he took the position as the president for the foundation. And even though the art, music, foreign language, these are very respectable subjects and very respectable supplementary curriculums, These are curriculums that the schools had for many years, and they have conducted these through the foundation for those many years. But as a Harvard graduate, Mr. Barely was motivated to raise as much money as he possibly could. In fact, he wanted to raise the most money that the school has ever raised with the foundation in the district at all, so that there could be some innovation that takes place, an innovative curriculum that could be instituted. And these could be added and offered to the programs that are already existed, and they wouldn't have to take anything out. They could just add to what is already there. He was also motivated by the fact that one of his past fraternity brothers from Harvard, Mr. Morley, was one of the other presidents serving as a foundation for a different school in the district. And so this, of course, becomes a little bit of a competitive nature between the two of them as well. Um, Mr. Barely did have an orientation with Mr. Santos, and then he set off to work. Mr. Barely, with his Harvard fraternity, etc., experiences, all of that, he considered himself more than qualified to run the foundation, and he probably was. He just needed to be more educated about the decisions and the policies, procedures, regulations, and laws. He decided to come up with this idea that was so unique that it would raise the most money of any foundation ever in the district as a whole. He remembered from his college days that there was a raffle for cash fundraiser, and when they did it in college, it raised more than $100,000. Mr. Bailey developed a strategy for this raffle. He proposed his idea to the foundation, and those in the foundation were all in huge support. But again, we don't see any of that checks and balances system where he should have taken it to the curriculum committee. Mr. Bailey was convicted of a misdemeanor when it's all said and done, and he was placed on probation for running the raffle for cash. The other knowns that we have Briardale Elementary. Uh, it's the smack dab in the middle of this diverse community. It serves as the town's community meeting center. The population within the school itself, just in Briardale Elementary, is 600 students, and that's for K through 5. There are 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, 1 high school, and of course the teachers spend their careers in the district with few resignations or transfers. Program knowns, it's K through 5. Foundation fundraisers support the supplementary curriculum, and we know right now that the supplementary curriculum consists of art, music, and foreign language. But what do we not know? So we're going to take a look at some of the unknowns. As far as Mr. Santos is concerned, it's unknown whether or not Mr. Santos played any other part as a leader's is supposed to play beyond the initial orientation he had with Mr. Barely. As a school leader, Mr. Santos should have been checking in with Mr. Barely along the way, but it's not known if he did or not. Mr. Barely, did he give any type of advice? Did he give any type of direction in regard to the legalities of fundraising? We don't know any of this. None of that was given as well. Mr. Barely, it is unknown as to whether or not Mr. Barely sought any type of legal advice when he was planning this fundraiser or the raffle. It is also unknown if he received any type of direction and just ignored it because he was trying to beat his former fraternity brother in the fundraising. The local sheriff, it's not known as to whether or not the sheriff had any type of information beforehand and talked with and warned Mr. Bailey. It's also unknown what the exact charges were with the misdemeanor. All we know is that he was charged with a misdemeanor, but we're not really sure exactly what that misdemeanor was. The tipster, it's unknown whether or not the tipster, who it was, how the tipster knew the information to take to the local sheriff's department, and we don't know the motivation behind the tip that was made. The place of Briardale, some of the unknowns, we don't know how much educator involvement there was in this particular case. We don't know what kind of legal training for the stakeholders goes on. We're unaware of the effectiveness and efficiency of the current curriculum, including the supplementary curriculum that has been bought with these fundraising dollars for years. We don't know about the political effectiveness or involvement in education in the town, and we're unaware of any involvement in politics and education. So we're not really sure what the political factors or motivators are, or if some of those political motivators and factors come within some of the people in town, and we don't know any of that either. As far as the program itself is concerned, we don't know the rate of educator involvement with the fundraising. We are unaware of the effective nature of the supplementary curriculum in education. Is the money from the fundraisers in the foundation going to a good cause? Is it effective in nature, or should they look at a change? We don't know the historical academic achievement and standards of the district overall, and we are unaware of the normal budget or formula for money and the manner in which it is used. We don't know if there is a little bit of wiggle room in the budget and they would not necessarily have to do the fundraiser to the full extent as they have been. All of that is unknown. So, as we look at a review of the information, we see the conflict in the situation as it is could potentially be damaging. It could be damaging the educators, all the stakeholders involved, and the community as a whole, especially people in the business community within the Briarwood area. Those who have an important stake in the outcome include all of the educators, all of the leaders, and all of the community members. And this is going to include members of the business community. And of course, most importantly, those at stake are the students and their futures. It will be very important to identify all stakeholders involved in the situation and possible ramifications in order to avoid any of the future issues that could come about that would be of the same nature or even in a likeness of nature, but different. Although more information could be obtained to make a better informed decision, there's always room to know a little bit more. There is enough information already to make a sound decision as it stands at this point. There's enough information and enough known about the issue to make a good sound decision. So we're going to look at the options. There are going to be some options identified with their possible consequences. When making decisions as a leader, it's imperative to weigh and consider several options. In this particular scenario, there are several ways in which the situation could be handled, several options that could be taken into consideration, along with the consequences of those actions. If we were to take no action, taking no action would mean leave everything as it is after the media and all talk dies down, allow Mr. Braley to get back to his position and his fundraising, and just leave it be. Well, the consequences of this could result in further issues with fundraising. There could be backlash in the educational community as well as in the business community, and ultimately result in bigger problems down the line if the situation is not rectified. Moreover, if Mr. Santos allows for this to simply blow over, there's a great possibility that he could lose his job due to a lack of professionalism and leadership and his lack of accountability as far as Mr. Barely was concerned. Or it could result in no further issues and a dissipation of the issues on its own as intended. Not likely, but it could happen. So if we look at the liberal and comprehensive strategy, this would be have a conversation with Mr. Barely, allow him to continue his fundraising, but give him more knowledge, give him more direction. Don't quelch his drive to raise a great deal of money for his vision of more innovation with the supplementary curriculum and education for the students. And of course, this would also affect the educators. But allow him to use his own innovation to drive the funds for the foundation. Well, some of these consequences, this could potentially have disastrous effects, really. This could lead to more issues. It could potentially create a legal problem for the school, the foundation, the district, Mr. Santos himself, and especially with Mr. Bailey. With the fact that Mr. Bailey is already on probation for his first raffle ticket incident, this could definitely produce bigger legal issues for him. Or it could be an issue that simply lays dormant for a very long time, continues to fester and bruise for years to come, but eventually, as all things happen the way they do, the volcano will eventually erupt sooner or later, and there will be a mess to clean. The intermediary action, which would be the minimum of that intermediary, is to set up a meeting to discuss the situation with the foundation, the superintendent, other administration, and with the Board of Education, all leaders involved. It'll be extremely important to express to these people, as well as to the educators in the district who have been supportive along the way, and the community as a whole, that Mr. Santos is very capable of effective leadership despite the issue that has occurred with Mr. Bailey and the raffle tickets. Mr. Santos will need to do some additional training, additional research, and be more educated and aware of the legal ramifications of the budget and the fundraising overall. He's going to need to prove that uh, he does hold some accountability and he is able to take care of these situations without having higher leadership having to step in. Going forward, there'll need to be some changes made in the way in which the financial structure of the foundation is handled, and the best option will be for an educator employed in the district to be the president of the foundation. This should be provided as a supplemental contract. It should include the ability to put together a committee that has business people in the community, parents, other teachers, and it would be really awesome to have at least one fifth grade student on this committee. Included on the committee with those students is going to give us also more of an inside factor of how these students think and what they see with what we're doing. This gives a broad array of people to help with ideas and fundraising while still keeping all the ideas focused on education and the future well-being of the educators, of the leaders, and of course, most importantly, of the students and the futures of all of these people and their successes. Possible consequences. It could very well end with a positive outcome that lays the foundation for better communication. That communication would take place between all stakeholders as well as educate a bunch of people who need these lessons on policy, quite frankly. It could also prevent any disastrous outcomes in the immediate future or in the long term future for all of the stakeholders, including the students. It could set a precedent for other decisions made in regard to fundraising or other financial decisions made for the benefit of the students, academics, of the successes of the school and the district overall. Or it could all kind of blow up in the face of the leadership. It could have adverse effects on school culture, future policy, and the future well being and success of all the students. It also is possible that despite this last ditch effort to reform the actions of these staff members, it could lead or result in further legal action against the school and the district. And if that were to happen, it would leave the future years with a much lower budget to deal with, a much smaller pool of money that they could use. And that's all due to just the litigation aspect of the legal action. It would devastate the future well-being and success of all the students. And if we look at the intermediary action with a more extensive approach to it, of course, so we're going to set up in that meeting again and follow through with all of those extensions from the other intermediary action. The same is going to hold true with this action going forward, making some changes in the financial structure of how things are handled, and to put that in the hands of an employed educator within the district already. And this is going to help provide accountability and structure. But we're going to take it a little bit further. We're going to take it one step further. And all the persons who are involved with the budgets and fundraising or any monies in the district or with the school really need to go through mandatory training for these purposes. Once their training has been completed, those who are on the foundation of the committee need to create financial education curriculum as part of the supplemental education for Briardale Elementary. This will lay a firm foundation of financial education for practical and future knowledge for all of the students. It's going to give educators, leaders, foundation and community members the opportunity to improve the community through the financial education successes of these young minds and the future generations. So what are some of the possible outcomes of this? It could very well end in a very positive outcome. It could be one of the most positive things that has come to the district in a long time. It could lay the foundation for better communication among all the stakeholders, and that would include, you know, it's going to educate people on what they don't know. They're going to learn new lessons on policy. It could also prevent any disastrous outcomes now or in the future for any stakeholders, including students, as far as financials are concerned. It could set a precedent for future decisions made in regard to budget and other financial decisions for the benefits of the students, for the educators, academics. It could be huge for the future success of the school altogether. Additionally, it could further bridge gaps between leadership and staff, and this could be the foundation for future cooperation in decision making through a more positive professional culture for everyone. And it would also be beneficial for the well being of all the stakeholders and the future successes of all of the students. Again, there is the possibility that it could blow up in the face of leadership and have some of those legal ramifications and be detrimental and devastate the future of the students and all stakeholders and their successes as well. Highly likely that it would not happen that way. However, it is a possible consequence. So then with those options and their possible consequences, of course, you have to evaluate all the options, the pros and the cons. There's always pros and always cons to all decisions made or not made, as well as in the manner in which they are made or not made. It's imperative to weigh these for each decision made in order to understand the future outcome and consequences of the decisions and the actions. And when we weigh those pros and cons, we can see if one or the other outweighs the other. So when we look at the no action pros, no one else is going to get upset. Leadership drew a line, but did not really have to rock the boat per se. There's no more needless time spent as a referee for the uh, policies, procedures, etc. And leadership can then use time more effectively, more efficiently. The con to that is going to be that it could result in the district undergoing financial lawsuits, other embarrassing setbacks for poor financial decisions, and it could devastate the future well being and success of all students. If we look at the liberal and comprehensive strategy pros, no one else is going to become upset. Leadership drew that line again. They didn't really rock the boat. No more needless time is going to be spent as a referee. If other issues arise, then the school, its leaders, and the community pretty much are going to learn their lesson the hard way. Sometimes that's the best way. But if we look at the cons or the other side of this, there are potential disastrous effects. This could lead to more issues. It could potentially create a legal problem for the school, for the foundation, the district, Mr. Santos, especially Mr. Barely. With the fact that Mr. Barely is already on probation for his first raffle ticket incident, this could definitely produce bigger legal issues for him. It could be an issue that simply lays dormant for a very long time, continues to fester and brew, but again, that volcano will eventually erupt sooner or later. There could be devastating future for the well-being and success of all the students. There could be adverse effects for all of the staff members and the leaders altogether. And it could greatly impact students' well-being and future success in a negative and adverse way. If we look at the intermediary action, the minimum pros, we're going to see that the foundation for better communication amongst all stakeholders would happen, educate many people who need these lessons on financial law, policy, regulations. It would prevent disastrous outcomes now or in the future for all stakeholders. That would be including students who are the biggest stakeholders. Set a precedent for future decisions made in regard to budget, other financial decisions made for the benefit of the students, academics, future success of the school, district, etc. Save the district and the school money from a lack of lawsuits filed, as well as saving the district and the school some humiliation from other media broadcast incidents with poor financial decisions that have been made within the district. On the other side of that coin, we see the cons. It might blow up in the face of leadership. There could be adverse effects on school culture, future policy, future well-being and success of students, stakeholders, etc. This last-ditch effort to reform the actions could also result in further legal action and lawsuits of litigation, and it overall would be devastating for the future well-being and success of all the students, as well as other stakeholders. If we look at the intermediary action with the more extensive approach, the pros to this: positive outcome that lays the foundation for better communication amongst all stakeholders. It'll educate many people who need lessons on policy, regulation, laws. It'll prevent any disastrous outcomes now or in the future for all stakeholders, including the students, who are the most important stakeholders. It'll set a precedent for future decisions made in regard to budget or other financial decisions when these are made for the benefit of students, academics, future success of the school and the district. It'll save the school and district money from not having to go through with a lawsuit. It'll save the district and the school from the humiliation that may come from the other media broadcast incidents with poor financial decisions. It could further bridge gaps between leadership and staff. It could lay a foundation for future cooperation and decision making through example. A more positive professional culture for everyone, which is very badly needed here. And it's beneficial for the well being of all stakeholders and the future successes of all students. And again, the cons of that would be that it would blow up in the face of leadership. It could possibly have adverse effects on school culture, future policy, future well being. And it is, again, a last ditch effort to reform the actions of staff members, which could result in further legal action against the school. And of course, that would leave a much lower budget and pool of money because of litigation. And the last con that it could possibly be devastating for the future well being and success of all students. Once we've looked at the evaluation, we've weighed those pros and cons of the evaluation of those options. It's now time to make a best option or choice. So, under the circumstances presented, the best option for decision in this case is going to be the intermediary action with more extensive measures. It can be easily implemented with great care and attention to all concerns, all stakeholders for the benefits of everyone involved. A short consultation of all stakeholders would need to take place, of course. This is the best, most creative, and beneficial option of all the options. It reaps the most benefits with the least possible negative consequences. And key, in the future, when new ideas, people, or committees or foundations take place, all stakeholders need to undergo training and have a full grasp of usage, laws, policies, personal abilities with the budgets, finances, any monies or credit cards, and fundraising. All of it together before full implementation takes effect. And of course, there needs to be steps in the process as well, so that when those steps are not followed, we can kind of backtrack to see where it fell through. Again, with this particular incident in this case, if Mr. Barely had done as Mr. Santos had done in the past and gone to the curriculum committee, they may have been able to point out the flaws in that raffle for cash. Moreover, with Mr. Santos, if he had been overseeing, had the oversight that he should have as a leader, he may have been able to catch the fact that Mr. Barely, had not gone to the curriculum committee yet and directed him to do so. So, with the decision implementation, there has to be a plan of action. With this plan of action, you would want to hire educator staff members of the school already in order to be the president of the foundation of the school, meet with all stakeholders. During this meeting, establish a committee, pull a school attorney into this meeting for educational conversation if needed. There's always a school attorney available, and that attorney should be utilized in situations like this when the law needs to be, it's imperative for the law to be met and followed through. Send all stakeholders for professional training. Establish a financial curriculum for all fifth graders. It'll be really important to teach the young minds of the future how to deal with the financial stability or instability that they may face. Actively monitor all stakeholders as they prepare, deliver the financial curriculum. Seek advice and any needed help from the superintendent, of course, and make sure everyone involved understands the adverse effects and consequences that could occur if these issues were not resolved. And if the plan of action does not work, it will be scaled back a little bit and revert back to the minimum version of one and the same. Something very important to know, understand, and remember. One of the most daunting and difficult tasks of administrators is avoiding negligent behavior on behalf of the school. And that, quite frankly, is what has happened here with Mr. Santos. He had negligent behavior. It needs forethought, guidance from staff members. Negligence is defined as to be the failure to exercise a standard of care that the doer, as a reasonable person, should have exercised in the circumstances. Undue indifference towards the consequences of a person's act or actions, or including the notions of duty, breach of that duty, unreasonable conduct, and resultant damage. And we can see here that the duty that Mr. Santos had it did not happen. There was a breach of that duty, and so therefore there was some negligent behavior that also took place with this case. Overall, with the best choice option made through the decision implementation process, this budget debacle isn't so much a debacle anymore. Thank you.